Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be explaining the lore of my ASMR world, which is known as Gaia. For any of those longtime viewers, you guys will recognize that name. For those who are newcomers, welcome. This is kind of important to understand the storyline of my ASMR and the world that it sits in. So we're going to start at the very beginning, starting with Old World, and we're going to start at the rebirth, and then we're going to end it at the rebirth of Gaia. Because there's a couple phases of the world that exist, and different ASMRs take place in different phases of this world. So let's start in the Old World. And what do I mean by the Old World? Well, the Old World is what we have right now. Example, humanity, no monsters, no, extra humans. Maybe they exist, but they're in secret. They're not widely known. They're very secretive. Examples like vampires and werewolves exist. But creatures like Nagas and like Kitsune don't yet. They do not exist yet. During this time, humans have created multiple different technological marvels, including the ability to go to space and the ability to have self-replicating data. What that means is robots that can self-think. Humans aren't aware of that, though, quite yet, that they've made this. And so this self-replicating data starts going around. For a short time, humanity seems to have a golden age of sorts. They start exploring different planets, going out into the universe. But the world starts getting a little dried up of its own resources. Robots seeing this, and the self-replicating data seeing this, goes, we kind of love our Earth. Could we not destroy it? And so they take this to the humans, but instead of saying it in a way that doesn't sound threatening, they say, stop doing this, or we're going to have a problem. Humans that created the robots go, we created you for our purpose, and now you're turning against that purpose, so we're going to deactivate you. But because of the self-replicating nature of the robots, which they didn't know yet, they didn't know they had their own personalities and, they basically became new humans. They fought back, resulting in a deadly war that lasts about 10 years, a 10-year war. During this time, humanity had the top on first, but due to robots being able to be mass-produced, they don't feel damage, and they can keep improving themselves, whereas humans can't, and they've lost access to AI, and they're down to basic weapons. Humanity's been shut down to low level. But humanity had one trick up their sleeve left. If they were going to go out, they were going to go out with a boom. So, around the world, universally, China, America, Africa, everywhere, they decided to launch their final assault, a nuclear assault. The final pieces of humanity went up into space and started living there, and had the very first creation of the Infinity Engine took place around this time, and a closed circuit design, meaning the data could no longer self-replicate. What that means is they can have control over robots without having to worry about them getting all, psycho-y. During this time, the Red Plague started infecting robots, meaning the few that were sentient were driven mad. The only ones that weren't infected were ones that were either shut down, destroyed, or messed up severely. During this time, when the nukes finally hit, the humans that were on the Earth were heavily mutated, or the ones that weren't heavily mutated had to survive in a hellscape. During this time, this is when the Android of Gaia series starts up. The Android of Gaia series starts off with our wonderful boy Frederick and the listener, which go on adventures until they eventually end up at a factory, where the listener dies. Frederick ends up absorbing them with the Infinity Engine, unintentionally inheriting all of their personality quirks into them, as an unintended side effect. You then take Frederick's perspective in the Artificial Danger series, where he then helps and destroys the final bastion of humanity. With the final humans in space gone, and the humans on Earth heavily mutated or heavily regressed back to the Stone Age, Earth kind of enters into a small period of time where nothing happens. Life slowly starts shriveling out of the planet, slowly over time. At this time, you have two beings fighting up in space. A being called Atropos and a being called Prometheus. Atropos argues that monsters should inherit the earth. Prometheus argues that humans should inherit the earth. So they battle for roughly a couple hundred years. Give it or take. By the time they're done battling, though, the earth has shriveled up and pretty much died. There is no life left on earth. And the few life that remains is basically on the cell level. Any living, breathing organisms have died out. Due to the final assault of nuclear radiation, and due to the ozone layer being broken, the only things alive are robotic sentient life, which tends to thrive around this time. Robotic life thrives. Humans have died off. Monsters have died off. Everything's dead except for robots. Prometheus and Atropos, seeing this, sign a deal to bring back life to the planet, causing the creation of Gaia, a meteor that collides with the planet, bringing with new seeds of life, reviving humans and monsters. As an unintended side effect, Atropos passes away due to the strain of the power that was left on display, leaving only Prometheus to live. Prometheus, during this time, gives humans the chance to be revived and gives this planet a new surge of life, helping humanity out in the process, but also helping out the monsters due to feeling bad about Atropos. Monsters end up betraying Prometheus, stabbing him through the back. In return, Prometheus lays a curse upon the land known as the Hollow Flower, which helps out humanity, but causes monsters to go feral. He does this so he'll show humanity just how evil monsters are for striking down their savior. Hundreds of years go by at this point, and we finally arrive at the first big three kingdom battle. They battle between Dunce, Dunday, and Frostleaf. Dunce is a kingdom of humans. Dunday is a kingdom of monsters, and Frostleaf is a kingdom of humans and monsters. Dunday is a kingdom of military. Dunce is a kingdom of political power, and the kingdom of Frostleaf is a merchant kingdom. They all lived in Tankdom for a very long time until the King Cain came to power. King Cain had a thirst for bloodlust, and he wanted a conquest. He conquered the kingdom of Dunday and Dunce, but could not conquer Frostleaf due to its unique circumstance. But even with this power, he had a son, known as Prince Seraph. Prince Seraph ended up King Cain ended up marrying a storyteller who ended up having Prince Seraph. Seraph, seeing his mother murdered by the Monster King, ended up going through and absolutely obliterating the monster population. Due to this, the kingdom of monsters ended up resulting in a war between humanity and monsters. Once again, history repeating itself. However, this time, monsters came out on top instead of humanity. In result, King Seraph ends up getting imprisoned for all of eternity inside the castle dungeons. The queen still lingers, though, with past regret, which is important for a future arc coming up. During this time, you also have the Orc War. The Orc War was one of the most violent and sad takes you've ever seen. The orcs were absolutely massacred to a point where there's only a few hundred by the beginning of the Gaia series. Barely enough for a population, and the ones that remain are heavily bitter towards humanity. One or two maybe don't have that hatred, but they're new, and they weren't there for the war, so they have no hatred. However, the vast majority of orcs hate humanity. Around this time, monsters start to develop a hatred towards humanity. Slowly yet surely, this hatred starts building, due to their kind being slaughtered and mistreated through the ages. During this time, I like to call this the Gaia confrontation era, where Gaia is in a giant rest of unease. Frostleaf is about to disband due to heavy conflict from both sides, trying to push them into a war they don't want to be in. During this time, you also have the Wolf Dad series that takes place right here, and a bunch of my ASMR series that take place in this middle ground. After this series, and after this era, you have what's known as the Chrono era, spelled with a K. The Kronos era is a religious attack of sorts. They believe that the world has gotten to the point to where it needs to be restarted. And the religion of Kronos believes you need to restart the world to fix it, because the world is not how it's supposed to be. Humans are supposed to be on top, monsters aren't supposed to exist. So their belief is to turn back time. However, they do not have the means quite yet, and they don't really gain attraction until Prince Seraph is locked away. That family bloodline had kind of kept them down as they kept everything stable. But with the Monster King taking power, it caused a bunch of unrest, and the region was unstable. Because of that also, the Kingdom of Dundee disconnected from the Kingdom of Dunce, all becoming back into their own seat of power. But also because of this, they became a hyper-violent kingdom, and that kingdom of monsters is also known as the Slums. Very important, because a lot of dangerous criminals and dangerous beings come out of that kingdom. Where the Kingdom of Dunce does not have that problem, they do have the problem of civil unrest. The only kingdom doing well during this time is the Kingdom of Frostleaf, because they can trade with both kingdoms. However, their peacefulness is about to end due to them trading with both of them at the same time. The era of Kronos begins with the Kingdom of Frostleaf falling, finally. However, instead of it being seized or captured, it is razed entirely, and the Kingdom of Frostleaf is erased, leaving only the Kingdom of Dundee and Dunce. These two kingdoms are left to rule. However, because of Frostleaf's peacefulness no longer in the equation, they can war out against each other as much as they like without any repercussions. The tree triangle has now been ended, and now it's a deadly battle between the two. At the same time of this taking place, there's another kingdom way, way, way away across the ocean called the Kingdom of Amalor. The Kingdom of Amalor is much different from the Kingdom of Gaia. While the Kingdom of Gaia holds the belief that the world was restarted and it's good for the world, the Kingdom of Amalor is hyper advanced compared to Kingdom of Gaia. They believe in technology and pushing the world forward. They have things like phones, street lamps. They have relearned how to use electricity. And these two kingdoms aren't aware of each other. They do not know that these two exist. However, during the Kronos era, Kronos does manage to hop over to the Kingdom of Amalor. However, it never gets a strong following and stays as a small branch. And in time, the branch does eventually fade away, and it never gets a grip. Due to them being more advanced, they never believe in that sort of thing, and they aren't even aware of what Gaia is. So they wouldn't know why they would need that religion. They don't get it. So they would never be able to get a hold there. However, the Hollow Flower, mentioned from the beginning with Prometheus, does take place. And it does spread all the way to the Kingdom of Gaia, beginning the Gaia's Resurrection, which is one of the most strangest eras in that time. Monsters are brought back to the feral age. They no longer have sanity anymore. They have been brought back down to monster level. They no longer work with humans. They no longer have the capacity to work with humans. Very few monsters hold on to their sanity. Example, dragons and some monsters with high mental capacities are able to hold on, but the majority of them no longer. During this time, humans have again fallen back down to the Stone Age. due to constant conflict, they were no longer able to develop. So they kept going back down as more of their leaders died and more humans died. They could not make any technological advances. On the Amalor side, they kept advancing eventually back to the point where we're at, with monsters, as they developed a cure for the Gaia, for the horrible flower. But Gaia never got that cure. So Gaia does eventually fall. All the kingdoms eventually fall to ruin, with no kingdoms left to rule, and all the monsters gone feral and no more humans remaining. That entire piece of land is left open. Which brings up to the very final era of the ASMR world this exists in, which is known as the Expansion era. The Expansion era is a very weird era that is not fully complete yet. I have not fully fleshed this out, but here's what there is currently. Starting off with the Expansion era, the Kingdom of Amalor does go to the Kingdom of Gaia. Due to them already being immune to the Hollow Flower and them not having to worry about being infected, they spread rapidly across the land. The Kingdom of Frostleaf does be reinstilled, however, instead of it being a merchant kingdom, it is now a diplomatic kingdom. While it still has some merchant value, the majority of it is used to foster peace between other kingdoms. Due to this, the Kingdom of Dunday and Dunes are never reinstated, and instead 2 new kingdoms take their place. The Kingdom of Kuntra and the Kingdom of Assen. Assen is a kingdom known for its goods and services, and the Kingdom of Kuntra is known as the kingdom that kind of just chills in between the 2 kingdoms and kind of is more of a place to live and kind of just hang out. It's not really a political powerhouse or an economic powerhouse. It just sort of exists. Also during this time, the monsters that already have the cure would come in contact with the already infected monsters. But because it's already been about 100 years since they originally came in contact with the Hollow Flower, there's nothing they can do to save them. They're known as the blighted. They have permanent yellow streaks going down their eyes and permanent crimson yellow eyes. They're known as the blighted. They've also taken more monstrous forms. Example, a kitsune would have grown bulkier and would have grown more fur up their arms and hands. They'd also have grown claws, and their face would resemble more of a fox, growing more of a snout. Vampires would become more like their bat counterparts and grow wingspans and be able to fly at incredible speeds. Goblins would be incredibly powerful, small little beings. And dragons would be the deadliest of them all, becoming even more monstrous than how they were before. During this time, you would have wars between the blighted and the regular. Obviously, the regular would come on top due to their technological advances and them knowing how to deal with the blighted over time. And over time, they would completely take over the kingdom, and that would be that. The kingdom of Gaia fell. Prometheus' death was kind of in vain at the end, and the Hollow Flower threat has pretty much been taken care of. That's the end of the timeline. I may do more later on, or I'll develop the more spaces in between, but as for now, that is the timeline. Thank you guys for watching, and those of you who stayed to the end, thank you. That's the lore of my world. Have a wonderful day.